I'm Ashton Addison from the Crypto Coin Show, and today on Blockchain Interviews with Michael Heinrich, co-founder of Zero G Labs. Michael, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Ashton. Pretty excited about being on.
Likewise, excited to dive into the intersection of AI and blockchain. And AI is growing so quickly, it's hard to keep up. I know your team has been super busy, and I want to dive into the testnet, roadmap to the mainnet, everything that's going on with Zero G. But I'd love to start off our conversation, first of all, with just a little bit on yourself in business and blockchain and what got you to starting Zero G Labs, and then we can dive into everything.
Yeah, it's funny. My first run-in with technology really happened when my family, so my dad, my mom, my sister, myself moved to Silicon Valley. And I was kind of I was around 13. I was put into a totally new environment, and I was a little bit bored at high school. And so I would just kind of show up to my dad's office after school and just, utilize the fast internet and kind of the technology that SAP Labs had. And one day, like, a manager just approached me and he was like, "Hey, I've seen you like a few times. You're interested in making yourself useful." And I'm like what? Like, what do I do? He's like, how about you learn how to program and, help me write some classes? And I'm like, I have no idea how to do that. He's like, no problem. I'll send you to a Visual Basic Bootcamp and, then you help us out. And so 4 weeks later, I guess I became the youngest programmer there. And because I was so young, they couldn't pay me in cash. So they gave me like free hardware. And nice. I was totally in heaven. I had like the latest ThinkPads and like laptops and all the cool hardware gears at that time. And so that's how I came into engineering and building some of my first software programs. And I stuck there throughout high school and college, and then eventually also worked at Microsoft and did some technical product management there. And then from there, moved over to the business side. I worked for Bain & Company, consulting Fortune 500 technology and finance companies. From there, then I moved to the East Coast in Connecticut and worked for Bridgewater Associates on the portfolio construction team. Then I moved back to graduate school at Stanford and built my first Web2 company. It's a company called Garden, which I scaled to about 650 employees at its height, about 100 million of contracted ARR. And so it became a unicorn and top Y Combinator company. And then late 2022, one of my classmates from Stanford, Thomas, called me up and he was like, "Hey, I invested in this company 5 years ago called Conflux. Two of the co-founders want to start something new, more global scale. Are you interested in chatting with them?" And so I said, "Yeah, of course, let's connect." And 6 months later of co-founder dating, I came to the same conclusion, like, wow, these are the best engineers I've ever worked with. We need to start something. And so those were really the origins of Zero G and our journey. It really started with the core of the team.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's such a cool backstory of growing up right into it. And I have something similar with my father being one of the early innovators in the internet. And here we are. And I feel like there's so much innovation still in blockchain. It's the next version of the internet to be able to be building something that I feel like is going to grow humongously still, especially with the now new capabilities of AI, incorporating that into blockchain. It's an amazing time to be building. So maybe you can talk about what you saw. You met with those new founders, and then you have that entrepreneurial journey. You've been through this transition of electronics and the internet as it continues to develop, and looking at where blockchain is at right now and AI. What was the problem that you saw that needed to be solved with inventing Zero G Labs?
Yeah, we wanted to do something at the intersection of what are we passionate, two, what is within our domain expertise, and then three, what does the space need in order to really be pushed forward? And so after a lot of conversations in the ecosystem with projects like Polygon and Arbitrum and various AI projects, it became pretty clear that data availability was one of those key unlocks. And so what we saw in the space is that the kind of standard was somewhere in the 1 to 10 megabytes per second of data availability capacity. But if you want to truly do, let's say, on-chain AI model training, we really need to be thinking about tens of gigabytes per second, especially for really large models. And so utilizing our backgrounds, and I actually haven't introduced Ming or Fan yet. Ming spent about 11 years at Microsoft Research. He wrote some of the first AI algorithms for Microsoft's Bing search engine. He's a distributed storage and scalability expert. So he wrote some of the key papers in the space, like Tango and Curfew. And then Fan was originally his intern, actually, at Microsoft Research before they started Conflux together. But he, equally impressive, was a MIT computer science PhD, has 2 Olympic gold medals in informatics, and also University of Toronto professor. And so with that kind of domain expertise around scalability, AI, distributed storage, we were then able to architect a really high throughput system. And our core insight was we need to basically segment data into a data storage and into a data publishing lane so that we can create an aspect of horizontal scalability within that system. So, and we made a lot of improvements in the actual architecture and implementation level specifics. And so net, each one of our nodes on our network can generate about 10 megabytes per second. And then per consensus layer, if you add about 5,000 nodes on that consensus layer, we can get to about 50 gigabytes per second in throughput per consensus layer. And that then gives us an advantage of also lowering costs by about 100x compared to current systems like Celestia and EigenDA and so on. Which then means, the whole preamble to get to the final goal of we can truly build things in a decentralized context just as well as in a centralized context. Same performance, same cost. The only limitations now are physical limitations like speed of light and so on for distributed systems.
Definitely. Yeah, there's always that speed of light issue, which it would be great to get there for data availability. Maybe you can explain a little bit further for those people who they're using the blockchain a little bit. They don't really understand the inner workings of it. What the inner workings of data availability, what is needed, say it's for AI or even just for a traditional search engine. Is it getting the information when you ask ChatGPT something, it needs to look for that information and bring it back or find it in a certain location? Can you just explain the data availability a little bit more?
Yeah, and using AI as an example. So if you're interacting with something like OpenAI, it's all in a centralized server farm. So you make a request, there's a bunch of stuff that happens in the background with the model around that server farm, a bunch of inference tasks. Essentially, you have a lot of GPUs kind of strung together in a centralized setting. And that's very different from a blockchain. Blockchain is a completely distributed system. You have often permissionless ways of interacting with that system. So anybody can join, anybody can generally become a verifier in a kind of proof of stake system. So then you take something like Ethereum and it has kind of what's known as a monolithic blockchain. It's got multiple functions. So you've got the execution layer, you have the consensus layer, you have the data availability layer, and then finally you've got the settlement layer as well. And so a monolithic chain does all of these functions. And most of the transaction costs go towards the data availability layer because basically it's verifying that a particular block has actually been published on the network. And so by pulling out that specific layer, we can then hyper optimize that part and make it significantly cheaper to publish data and significantly more performant to have full throughput on a particular blockchain by making that modular and pulling that out of something like Ethereum. And so in effect, that's what we're doing. We're hyper optimizing this one function and part of a blockchain.
That's very cool.
And so then, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And so then when you have a AI specific use case, the way it would then work is, let's say on the execution layer, you have a specific inference task. That inference task then goes to us as a DA layer. We then pull all of the right serving infrastructure together, find the right GPU locations, load the particular model that's stored into memory, and then kind of serve that to the end user. So it's quite a different back-end process, but it ends up going to the same kind of user experience.
No, that's good to know. And if you were to compare the OpenAI experience that people are using right now, as you mentioned, it's centralized using multiple GPUs, to something that is decentralized or utilizing blockchain in some way. Is that something that's viable today and with Zero G Labs technology, or where exactly is that at, where we can have those options freely available, where, hey, this is just as good as OpenAI, but also utilizing blockchain?
Yeah, so today what's possible is you can utilize open source models like Llama 3 or Mistral, which are definitely rivaling OpenAI and its capability. And there's a consistent kind of, we want to one-up each other. OpenAI is a fully closed source system, so you can only utilize the ChatGPT model if you're within their framework and you're utilizing their fine-tuning tools and so on. Now, the issue with that is if you imagine running an AI agent that's, for example, steering a traffic control system or running a big administrative process in a company, like, we're going to match candidates with the right jobs. When you're in the OpenAI framework, then the challenge is you don't know what the model was trained on, where the model is sitting, what version of the model you're getting, what the kind of weights and biases were in that particular model. And so you have no control over that. But with kind of an open source model that, let's say, you can train on your own type of training data, you can know at any point in time, what version of the model you're running, what decisions are being made by the model. It's completely publicly verifiable. And that's really the power of combining AI and blockchains together. And so you've got full provenance, full verifiability, total transparency. In fact, you then have an OpenAI, pun intended.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think that as AI continues to grow, there will be more of a discussion around the biased, unbiased part of it? When in traditional search results, you can search and you can scroll down and see, sort of different results. But with OpenAI, it's just like, here's the answer. And in the quotes, yeah, it may not be accurate, but like, it's sort of like, this is the end all be all truth. But what are the algorithms, or what's the closed source software that's providing you that information, and sort of who is the person who's saying that this is the truth?
Exactly. And who's deciding what bias to remove from the training data? And who's deciding what the alignment of that particular model is with human interest? That's all happening within one company. And so how as a society can you then have insight into what that one company is doing? In fact, I think I recently just read that the head of alignment for OpenAI quit because he wasn't comfortable with the practices of OpenAI. And, that's an issue. We're trusting this big entity to do what's right for an entire society. Shouldn't we as a society really dictate what's right for us as a society? And so how do we really become part of this governance process? How do we make AI a public good? And that's what really we stand for.
Yeah, it's a big feat. But OpenAI has grown to be a huge company. And there's a lot, if you're going to become the next Google search engine and more, then there's got to be a lot into that. I would love to learn more on how your team has been doing this. How long has it been in the works for, and what stage are you guys at exactly right now?
Yeah, we've been working. So I went full time in May of last year. So it's almost exactly been a year, which is kind of fun, crazy to see. We came out of stealth about a couple months ago. We made the announcement that we raised the 35 million pre-seed. And then with that, started to do a number of initiatives. So we've also recently announced our public testnet a few weeks ago. And then we're going to announce public testnet V2 quite soon, and then move to mainnet hopefully sometime in July.
Very cool. And with that public testnet, is there ways that the end users or developers can interact and test it out? What exactly is possible in the testnet?
Yeah, so you can run your own storage nodes. You can run your own validator. You can deploy different kind of chains to utilize the data availability property. So you can fully utilize the system in its testnet state. Of course, because it's a testnet, there's certain things that we're still upgrading. In V2 of the testnet, we're going to improve some of the kind of storage mechanisms. and also the interface with interacting with our testnet. But all of the most of the functionality is live. There's some on the DA side that we're still kind of testing out and working on as well. So, for example, we'll be moving from a data availability sampling technique to a quorum-based technique, just for kind of speed and performance gains. And so all of that's going to happen in testnet v2.
Great, looking forward to it. And in terms of connecting into the blockchain world, is this something that other blockchains can be cross-compatible with, or they can interact and use the applications on as well? Or is it sort of a standalone with Zero-G?
No, absolutely. And for depending on where you are in the stack as a blockchain, we can have different use cases. So if you're layer one, we can support you with doing state snapshots, for example, or you can fully offload your state to us and we can manage that for you. So if you have a blockchain that can't handle a lot of data throughput, then you can just offload it to us and we can deal with it. If you're layer two, then you can utilize us as both a kind of storage layer as well as the data availability layer. And then the same thing for layer threes and app chains as well. And so, yeah, we're very modular and you can plug us in however you need.
That's amazing. So would you be able to potentially lower the Ethereum transaction fees for all these people that are paying too high fees, especially when it starts pumping?
Well, yes. So that's the whole idea behind the layer twos on Ethereum. Is basically like Optimism and Arbitrum, all of those kind of low fees. One of the reasons is you're offloading kind of the execution to a different layer, and then you're batching transactions together. And then if they implement a better DA system, then you're starting to talk about fractions of a fraction of a penny in terms of transaction costs. So that allows completely different possibilities. Like you can now have fully on-chain gaming, fully on-chain AI, because you almost have gasless fees at that point. And so, yeah, that's kind of the next evolution of blockchains. So as these layer twos and layer threes and app chains adopt DA solutions like us, then you can create completely different experiences.
I'm really looking forward to that. And, I saw some recent updates in the AI world with the newer versions of OpenAI. And I feel like AI as an industry is just growing exponentially. And I'm guessing that it's going to be using a lot more data as hopefully, we can start generating videos and real-time metaverses and all of this kind of stuff. Do you have any predictions on, what we might see in AI in the next year or even 6 months, and how much more data availability we might need as it continues to grow?
It's always hard to predict the future, but some of the things I think that are going to happen in the next, let's call it 5 years, is definitely more specialized agents for particular types of use cases. So in the blockchain world, instead of, for example, waking up in the morning and saying, oh, I want to buy this particular coin that's on this particular chain and I have to go through this DEX and this bridge, you can just tell your agent, like, go buy this for me. And so that's one, key application there. And then other things in the non-blockchain world. So for example, there's going to be full self-driving mode from Tesla. I've already kind of tested some of the beta out and it's pretty amazing. It still has some ways to go, but we'll start seeing AI agents really interacting with the real world as well. And then we'll see a world where we start having humanoid robots also interacting with our world. And they're going to have AI models in them. And then we just need to ensure as a society that there's certain features and safety mechanisms built in so that full alignment with human interest is ensured. And so I'm starting to see a world like that where AI is part of the fabric of society, whether it's digital or physical.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy future, and I feel like it's gonna grow quickly. And so it's good for us to be involved in following along and hopefully capitalizing on the opportunities as they come to grow. Is there any insights into the mainnet? You said it's coming in the near future, but what has to be done, and what else can people do to follow along to make sure that they get involved with it or learn more about it, on day one, hopefully?
Yeah, absolutely. So the mainnet, we're working super hard. Basically, the technology team or like Ming and Fan's teams are basically working at 110% to get there as quickly as possible. And so we're hoping sometime end of July, for mainnet phase 1, which basically gives you the basic features in a stable environment around storage, the data availability components. And so you can definitely utilize our testnet right now to do the things that I mentioned, which are, running a storage node, running a validator node, deploying app chains, layer 2s to utilize our DA property, and so on. So definitely do that. You can follow us on X. So just at 0g_labs, and my personal one, which is at @m_heinrich. And you can see the latest updates there. And if you're interested in building in this space, we also recently launched an accelerator together with One Piece Labs, and those applications are live till mid of June. So definitely apply if you want to build part of the kind of biggest AI meets blockchain community in the world. We're super excited about that.
That's very exciting. And I can leave the link to the socials for 0G and yourself if anyone wants to connect in the show notes below, and to the platform and the testnet details. And hopefully people will be paying attention. I would love to also have you back on right around the mainnet launch if possible. I know you guys are going to be super busy. But it's a good thing because you're helping change the world. So I really appreciate your time today, Michael. All the best with everything with 0G Labs, and let's definitely follow up in the near future.
Yep. Thank you. It was a big pleasure being here.